The night was thick with mist as Ethan Carter, a travel vlogger drawn to eerie legends, ventured into the forgotten village of Ravendale. Ignoring warnings from a fearful old man, he sought to document the town's mysteries. Upon arrival, an unsettling silence greeted him. No sounds of life, only the distant whispers of something unseen. At the village square, Ethan encountered 3 veiled women, their presence both mesmerizing and unnerving. They welcomed him, leading him through the decaying streets to a grand but decayed house. Inside, time seemed frozen. Offered food and cryptic answers, Ethan's unease deepened as he noticed shadows shifting and empty chairs that felt occupied. When he attempted to leave, the women stopped him with a chilling gift. A touch to his forehead flooded his mind with horrific visions. Countless victims, their mouths sewn shut, trapped in eternal silence. The women, now unveiled, were inhumanly perfect, their beauty unnatural and terrifying. Panicked, Ethan fled into the night. The mist clawed at him, whispers chased him, but he managed to escape in his car, leaving behind his camera, his proof. Yet as he drove, he saw them in the rearview mirror. Ethan drove non-stop until dawn, his grip tight on the wheel, his breath unsteady. Even miles away from Ravendale, he felt unseen eyes watching. When he reached a rundown motel in Miller's Hollow, he barely made it inside before exhaustion overtook him. The motel room reeked of mildew and decay, but it was shelter. Locking the door, Ethan collapsed onto the bed, hoping sleep would bring clarity. Instead, the nightmares came. He dreamed of Ravendale, first alive and thriving, then rotting before his eyes. The villagers screamed as their flesh blackened, their eyes hollowing into darkness. At the center stood the 3 unveiled women, inhumanly perfect yet utterly wrong. Their eyes swirled with something ancient, their smiles stretched too wide. "You cannot escape," one whispered. "You belong to us now." The ground beneath him turned to sludge, skeletal hands pulling him into the abyss. As he sank, the last thing he saw was their faces, watching, smiling. Ethan woke with a gasp, drenched in sweat. The motel room felt suffocating, the air thick with something foul. Then he heard it, a soft, melodic hum, came from the bathroom. The door stood ajar, steam curling from within. He stepped closer, his breath hitching. The scent of jasmine filled the air. He pushed the door open. The mirror dripped with condensation, but the room was empty. Yet when he turned to leave, his reflection didn't move. It watched him with dark, unfamiliar eyes. Then, impossibly, it smiled. "You left something behind," it whispered. Ethan staggered back. The reflection lifted a veil. Beneath it was her face, the tallest woman. His own lips moved as she spoke. "You belong to us." Panic seized him. He bolted from the room, the hallway twisting around him, doors shifting with strange symbols. The humming followed, growing louder, pressing into his skull. He reached his car, barely starting the engine before speeding into the night. But the humming didn't stay behind. It was inside him now. Hours later, Ethan stopped at a gas station, desperate for reality. Inside, a newspaper caught his eye. Ravendale, the vanishing village, 40 years later, no survivors ever found. His blood ran cold. The article spoke of travelers who disappeared or returned changed. Only one survivor had escaped, now institutionalized, claiming the village was haunted by women who weren't women at all. Ethan's stomach twisted. He had escaped, but the curse had left with him, and it wasn't done yet. Ethan gripped the wheel, his breath ragged. The article lay crumpled beside him. Ravendale, the vanishing village, 40 years later, no survivors ever found, except one. James Holloway. Blackridge Asylum was 2 towns over. If anyone had answers, it was him. Ethan didn't hesitate. He floored the gas station's lights vanishing in his mirror. The humming followed, first faint, then louder, curling through the static of the radio, and then movement in the rearview mirror. A veiled woman sat in the back seat, motionless. Mist clung to her like a living thing. Slowly, she lifted her veil. Flawless, inhuman, smiling. You cannot run, she whispered. Ethan slammed the brakes. The car skidded to a stop. He turned. The back seat was empty, but on the rearview mirror, written in frost, soon, Blackridge Asylum loomed in the dawn light, its gates rusted with time. Inside, the air was sterile, tinged with something old. James Holloway? The receptionist asked. Ethan nodded. Room 217. 10 minutes. James looked like a man who had seen hell. His hollow eyes met Ethan's. You shouldn't have come, he rasped. You know why I'm here, Ethan said. James let out a humorless laugh. They brought you to me, didn't they? Ethan's stomach twisted. The moment you stepped into Ravendale, you were marked, James continued. It's not a curse. It's an invitation. Ethan felt the cold under his skin, the whispers pressing against his thoughts. How do I stop it? James leaned forward, his grip surprisingly strong. You don't, he said. You can only return. Ethan recoiled. They don't just kill you, James murmured. They break you, lure you, and once you give in, you become one of them. Ethan's pulse pounded. Is that what happened to you? James shook his head. I never gave in, but I was cursed to remember. And now, so are you. Ethan turned to leave. James' voice stopped him. They'll offer you something, he said. Something you want most. And when you take it, his sunken eyes darkened. You'll never be human again. Outside, Ethan gulped in cold air. His phone buzzed. A message. Unknown number. No words. Just an image. His camera, the one he'd left behind. And beside it, a single, delicate hand. Nails painted the color of fresh blood. A second message followed. Come back, Ethan. We've been waiting. His pulse stopped. He turned to his reflection in the car window. A woman in a veil stood behind him, smiling. Ethan couldn't breathe. The veiled woman in his reflection didn't blink, just stood there, her presence sinking into his bones like ice. His phone buzzed. You can't ignore us, Ethan. Come home. A voice whispered. Not from the phone, not behind him, but inside his head. We can make this easier for you. He squeezed his eyes shut. When he opened them, she was closer. Not in the reflection. Right behind him. A breath of cold air against his neck. Go away, he rasped. A soft chuckle. But you belong to us now. His stomach lurched. He turned, and she was gone. The parking lot was empty. His reflection was normal again. But the air still hummed. He was running out of time. Ethan drove for hours, but the humming followed. By nightfall, he pulled over, exhausted. Then movement. A man stood in the middle of the road. Not one of the veiled women. Someone else. Ethan stepped out. Who are you? The man took a slow step forward. You shouldn't have left, he said. Ethan's blood ran cold. The voice was his own. The stranger stepped into the moonlight. Ethan was staring at himself. The doppelganger smiled. You feel it, don't you? The hunger. Ethan backed away. I don't know what you're talking about. His twin laughed. Lying won't save you. You've already started to change. Ethan clenched his fists. That's not true. Then why haven't you eaten? The realization hit him like a sledgehammer. Days without food. No hunger. No weakness. Except now, something inside him stirred. Not for food. For something else. The doppelganger leaned in. Go back to them, Ethan. Accept what you are. And they'll give you everything you desire. Ethan turned to flee. But before he could move, cold hands wrapped around his shoulders. A whisper at his ear. Come home, Ethan. Darkness swallowed him whole. Ethan woke in Ravendale. The village stood still and waiting, shrouded in mist. And in front of him, the three veiled women. You are ready now, the tallest one murmured. Ethan's throat was dry. Ready for what? She lifted her veil. Her face was breathtaking, inhuman. But her eyes, they were his own. The truth settled like ice in his veins. He hadn't just been marked. He had been changing all along. You were never meant to leave, she whispered. This was always inside you. The hunger deepened. The mist wrapped around his legs, welcoming him. James Holloway's words echoed in his mind. They'll offer you something, and when you take it, you'll never be human again. Ethan's fists clenched. Make your choice, the woman whispered. A long, slow breath left his lips, the last breath of his old life. Then, finally, he stepped forward, into the mist, into their world, into what he was always meant to become. Ethan was never seen again. His car sat abandoned. His name faded into another forgotten mystery. Only James Holloway knew the truth. One night, as the wind howled, he heard the humming, and in his cracked mirror, he saw Ethan, smiling.